The topic of my presentation is Journey of EBPR Compliance on NXP Landscape Devices. Myself Priyanka from NXP, my co-presenter are Poonam from NXP and Ilyas from Naro. So the agenda of the presentation is why EBPR, why it was born, what is the status of EBPR on NXP Landscape Devices, what are the challenges that we are facing while enabling EBPR on NXP Landscape Devices. Then I'll talk about the secure variable support using RPMB, the feature which is recently added by Ilyas, and its status on NXP Landscape device. And then we'll conclude with some example of EBPR running on NXP Landscape platform with the video demos. Why EBPR? There was a requirement for the embedded products to remove the locked-in between the OS and the firmware. What does that mean? It means that the same hardware, like for example, I take an example of NXP LX2 board with the firmware, should be able to support various flavors of OS, whether it's a SUSE Linux or NXP LXDK Linux or Upstream Linux or any other distro Linux. Also, we want that the same distro should be able to run on multiple platforms. So whether it's like, if I take example of SUSE Linux, it should be able to run on LX2 board, it should be able to run on another NXP LX1088 board or any other NXP ARM64 compliant chip or any other vendor ARM64 chip. So there was a requirement of clear isolation between OS and the firmware so that the independent development of both can take place. The firmware should be supplied by the SoC vendor or the board vendor, and the device tree which tells the hardware definition, it should be part of the firmware. And the Linux image and root file system, it can come from distro or from the custom Linux, or they can come from upstream. Another requirement is backward compatibility, which means that the old firmware should boot the new kernel. What does that mean? That suppose if I have working solution of SUSE Linux and on an LX2 board, and then we decide SUSE to upgrade to the latest upstream version. So it should be able to smoothly upgrade the kernel and run that on the same old firmware. Another requirement is forward compatibility. What does that mean? It means that if I have working solution of SUSE and an LX2 firmware, and then I update the firmware, so I should be able to run the new firmware. I should be able to use the new firmware to boot the SUSE Linux. So all this was a requirement for the embedded products, and then there was a need from some standardization or a specification. That's how the EBPR was born, embedded baseboard requirement specification. The specification to define the requirement on platform and OS for the embedded products. Okay, here I am going to talk about EBPR status on NXP Landscape device and some of the good practices that we follow in NXP Landscape which make it easy to be EBPR compliant. NXP Landscape platform, like we follow the upstream first approach. What does that mean? It means that all the platform patches are first sent to the upstream, then only they are accepted in NXP and internal releases. Hence, all the upstream development features that have been developed in the upstream were able to easily run on the NXP products. And we have a proof of record of working of various OS flavor like Upstream, SUSE, LSDK on the same NXP firmware. In fact, SUSE announced our Landscape platform in their releases. NXP, as part of its LSDK, releases firmware as well as we do send it to the upstream. But the current open challenge is the device tree. It is still a part of Linux repository, whereas it should have been a part of firmware. The Linux image and root file system, they can come from distro, they can come from upstream or custom. Backward compatibility, yes, we do maintain the backward compatibility. The DT bindings are always backward compatible. Forward compatibility is still a challenge. Like sometimes all the combination may not work. Here I have taken the EBPR specification from the latest version v1.0.1 and had tried to map it to the NXP firmware U-boot based. So EBPR specification talks about the block device partitioning. So yes, we do support distro boot in NXP firmware on USB, SATA, SD. EBPR talks about the clear firmware storage and the clear isolation of firmware and the OS images. Yes, we do maintain that in NXP firmware. Here the recommendation is to use file system based firmware, which is still not supported in NXP firmware. So I'm going to talk more about this in the later slide. EBPR talks about the UEFI specification UEFI should execute at either EL1 or EL2. Yes, we do support U-boot U-boot do support runs at EL2 and it support loading the EFI application. EBBR asks that the RAM should be identity map. Yes, we do support identity map MMU mapping of RAM in U-boot. EBBR asks for the configuration table, and that is provided in form of device tree. EBBR asks for here I have mentioned only the mandatory services. So EBBR asks for the EFI get variable, next variable, set variable, reset system. So that all these services are currently supported in U-boot. EBBR asks for the UFI runtime services like set virtual map, EFI convert pointer, basically to support the virtual mapping in OS. So yeah, that is supported. There is another optional feature of UFI of the EFI get variable and get next variable in as a runtime service. So we are able to validate this using the upstream U-boot. So I'm going to talk more about this in later slides. EBBR asks for the runtime device mapping. The firmware runtime mapping should not interfere with OS. So yes, we do maintain that in our solutions. EBBR asks for the EFI reset and shutdown as a secure firmware, and it recommends the PSC specification. So the NXP firmware is TFA based, so we do support this specification as well. Okay. In this slide, I'm going to talk about the challenges in enabling EBBR on NXP devices. So EBBR recommends the file system based firmware, but that currently is not supported for NXP chips because it requires a change in the boot architecture flow. The current NXP boot ROM, they cannot interpret the file system, so it's not that easy to support. And like for SD boot, like EBBR recommends GPT, but like for SD boot, the boot ROM expects the first data structure at a particular offset, which does not leave the enough headroom for the GPT partition. So currently again this is not supported on NXP platform. Device tree should be part of firmware and not Linux. So like EBBR recommends that the device should be part of the firmware, not the Linux. But currently NXP solution have separate device tree for U-boot and Linux. In fact, recommendation is that it should be just one, which captures the hardware description. In fact, the distro like SUSE, they prefer U-boot device tree to use it to boot OS. But this is a community-wide accepted problem and which needs to be resolved. And there is already some actively work going on by the EBBR owner Grant and Linaro in device tree forum. Some proposals on the table are like separate repo for device tree, or use device tree, maintain device tree only in U-boot or system device tree. Like some of the other things that we are implementing to take care of this, that upstream U-boot patches in device tree are accepted only when they come from stable commit of Linux, so that they match, so that the U-boot and device tree matches. Backward compatibility is still strictly followed. Like all the device tree patches, the DT bindings here, they need to be backward compatible. Only then the patches are accepted. Any compatibility breaks should be informed immediately to the community and should be fixed as soon as possible. Okay, so I have just talked about the device tree. Here I am going to show like the complex nature of device tree for NXP SoCs and how the device tree fixup are very much critical for the NXP SoCs because of their complexity. The NXP SoC provides signal level multiplexing to provide various interface like using the RCW configuration, and we only use a single device tree to support all the different MUX configuration, and based on the RCW read or some hardware config or some user input or runtime detection at runtime, the U-boot go and fix the device tree. So I'll elaborate more what all have just said. So suppose this is an LX2 chip and the SD and DSPI interface are MUXed at the signal level. Now this is a board, and like here again I have a MUX and a DSPI and a SD interface are MUXed. So at the runtime, U-boot will go and read the RCW, which will tell like whether SD or DSPI was selected, and based on this it will go and disable or enable the nodes in the device tree. And also it configure the MUX, this MUX on the board to select SD or DSPI. So this show like how much critical the device tree fixup are currently for the NXP landscape products. Okay, here I am going to talk about the secure variable support using RPMB. The new feature is recently added. The embedded devices don't have the secure world flash, but they do have the RPMB on eMMC, which we can use to store the EFI variables. The EDK2 standalone MM application can be used to verify read and write EFI variable. The OptiOS can read and store data in RPMB partition, and the code was added to launch the STMM from a separate secure partition manager within the Opti. The benefits of using this approach is that we're able to reuse the STMM, we're able to match the ARM 8.4 FFA architecture, we're able to store EFI variables in the RPMB. But the limitation of this is that the SPD, the Secure Payload Dispatcher, is used for OPTI, and unfortunately both SPD and SPM, they are mutually exclusive. It means that we can't have EFI variable and OPTI OS running at the same time. Get set variable status in Linux. Get variable and get next variable are now supported in Linux, but the set variable will still return EFI unsupported. So work is still undergoing to support this. Here I have mentioned some of the example of eBay running on NXP device. We are able to boot Linux using the boot EFI command. We are able to boot Linux via grub interface. We are able to boot distros like SUSE. Some of the third-party OEMs, like, they are able to use NXP chips and boot SUSE on that. The get variable, the get next variable, set variable are supported in U-boot, and they have been verified on NX2 boot. The get variable and get next variable are supported in Linux, and they have again are verified on NXP boot. So I am going to give a demo on 3, 5 and 6 in the slides ahead. So this is the first demo, the SUSE distro booting on LX2 board. So here I have used an LX2 board with a SUSE installer installed on a USB drive attached to this board, and a UART console and an Ethernet console attached to the PC for taking the images. These are some of the important commands I have mentioned here. Here is the demo.
This is LX2160A RDB board, the U-boot prompt. I have flashed SUSE installer in USB using the DD command. You can use the DD command or copy it via Windows. So now I am getting the device tree here. Now I am doing the device tree fix up, and now simply the boot command. This will invoke the distro boot. Since we have an installer on the USB, the grub file that is coming up, I will select installation since we are doing it for the first time. So the installer is now executing. This will take some time. This is basically in the background checking, doing the checking of all the hardware devices. So now it's ready. So now it will invoke the YAS2 installer. So this will start the installation. So again this will take like time, so I need to pause the recording.
Yeah, so like after the installation, it will install all the SUSE installer on the, it will install the SUSE OS distro on the hard disk, and we will be able to reboot with the hard disk. So I just done the recording till here. Moving to the next slide. So demo 2 talks about the get set secure variable via OPTI. So I mentioned about the important sources here and the commands. Here the kernel and the U-boot will be running in the non-secure world, and the OPTI and the runtime firmware will be running in the secure world. Again, here I have used the LX2 board, LX2160 RDB for this demo. So here.
So here I am going to demonstrate how to build images and how to run on the board. The board is LX2160A RDB board. So I am building the EDK2. I will be copying the output boundary to OptiOS. So now I am building the OptiOS. Again, the output boundary will be copied to the TFA folder. This OptiOS taken from the upstream. Now I am building the U-boot. Again, this is taken from the upstream. I will be copying the output boundary to the TFA. This is TFA. It is getting built. Now I will be copying the output boundaries to the board. So this is the board. So the images are now in the TFTP folder. So I'm copying onto the board and will be flashing on the alternate FlexPy flash here. So I'm burning the TFA images, the FIP and the BL2 PBL. Now I am switching to the alternate FlexPy flash. So this will be we will have a TFA running, then a OptiOS, and then U-boot. It will be using the RPMB block in the eMMC to store the EFI variables, and I will use set printenv command to read those EFI variables. And a setenv command to set a new variable, like their test3 is a new EFI variable. So we can see in the test3 here. Now I will be putting the kernel. So we have seen how to get and set EFI variable in secure world in U-boot. We will see now in Linux how to get the EFI variables. I've got the image, Linux image, and now I'm getting the device tree. I'm doing the device tree fix up. Now I will be booting using the bootEFI command. So the kernel is booting. This kernel is built using the upstream kernel 5.9. So this supports getting the EFI variables. So I will be able to get the EFI variable in secure world. Again, the OS applicant is running here. So you can see its latest 5.9 kernel. I will be using EFI var command to list the EFI variable. So we have seen how to set EFI variable in secure world in U-boot and how to get them in Linux. So that's it.
So with this, I conclude my presentation. Open for questions now.